Hello, somebody's been kind enough to do a video critiquing and criticising and finding flaws in what I say about what awaits us, what the situation we're in, what's coming and what we can do about it, how we can get out of it, particularly how we deal with the problem of demographic invasion and how I think we're going to collapse our way out of those problems and not legislate our way out. Now, I like it if people try and critique what I'm doing, if they criticise it, and if they try and give me a hard time. The reason I like it is because people are engaging with what I'm saying. People are knocking it about, seeing if it makes sense, and I do welcome that. I'm very grateful to him. It's called Wyvern the Terrible. I'm grateful to him for doing this, and I hope other people will do so as well. But because what I'm saying is likely to happen, I think must seem so strange, and the solution must seem so extreme that it's very easy for people just to switch off from it. So I'm glad if people try and give me a hard time. Now this is the fella here, Wyvern the Terrible, Flaws in Gavin Bobby's Societal Collapse Theory. He also talks about the perestroika deception. There's, if you can see it, there's a nice little picture of me right at the beginning. Let me go back. What I want to do is I want to analyse or go through yet again, what I think is likely to happen, what I think we're facing, what I think the solution is likely to be. It might be repetitious, but you'll see why it's relevant. Because Wyvern, I think he fails to address adequately what I'm saying. He just says I'm saying what I'm not saying. So what I think is likely to happen, when I say we're going to collapse our way out of this, what that means is I think the system we're in, I think, will collapse economically and financially. Effectively, the growth of tax and spend, particularly the welfare system, and the debt mountain, the debt bubble that arises out of that, and the efforts to boost the economy through monetary means by boosting the money supply, creating ever more and more debt. Eventually, that will collapse the economy. So I think a democratic state becomes the welfare state, and then the welfare eventually, one way or another, collapses the economy. If that happens, if the state goes broke, the welfare state goes broke. This is a link that a lot of people struggle with. All I can say is, if you don't have any pocket money to buy sweeties for your friend, you can't buy sweeties for your friend. If the state doesn't have any money to buy things that you like healthcare or rent subsidy, or to pay for your dole money, or to turn on the street lights, or to fix potholes, it can't do any of those things. State has no money, you get no money, you get no free stuff. And then on the back of that, I think people will become extremely angry and you'll get riots in the streets. Now, as I say that, I think the welfare state is likely to break down. The anger and irritation that you probably feel at me just for saying it, think about that anger, that dislike that you have for me just saying it. Imagine how you're going to feel if it actually happens. I think you'll feel as though the sky has fallen in. If suddenly hospitals close, roads don't get repaired, the police don't call when there's a burglary. Also, what you get is you then get a lot of feedback loops. So people become extremely angry with the state for having broken its promise. People don't vote for the state as for the security it provides. People vote for the welfare that it provides. That's the reason for the existence of the state today. If the welfare goes, people will say there's no point having a state authority. I don't have to accept its authority anymore. And that then undermines the authority of the state. It undermines its ability to extract taxes, which then undermines its ability to pay for things like welfare even more. So you get into a cycle. You get other feedback loops. As the authority of the state goes down, crime becomes rampant. And the example I quote is the example from Argentina during the 1980s up to the 2000s, when it was falling over every few years. You could tell when the government had fallen over because cars no longer stopped at traffic lights, and because that's where the carjackings occur. Crime goes rampant. Burglars graduate up to being home invaders. They wait until you're in to burgle you. Policemen find they can make more money becoming kidnapping gangs. You just, no one comes out if you get mugged. No one comes to help you, and that creates just a downward spiral into the breakdown of the system, which I think could happen very fast if the state goes broke. If it goes broke, I think it will go broke fast, and then the collapse of its political authority will follow on the heels of that very fast. That then becomes an acute problem of order. It is the denial of the the primal human need for law. What I think then will happen is people will say, I can't get law and order and protection from the state. Where else can I get it? Well, I don't really want to have to go to criminal gangs to protect me. Criminal gangs can't do it effectively. I don't want to go to theocrats or rogue colonels or various other strongmen. Strongmen, they may be able to preserve some kind of order to stop the rioting, but they can't deal with contract disputes, landlord and tenant law, or the finer points of adjudicating your mortgage. There's nothing. So commerce, they can't encourage commerce. Quite the reverse, because they're generally quite criminal. So what people will need is a form of transparent procedural law that applies laws, often really very similar to the law, most of the laws we have now, but that can apply them and enforce them. And I think people will then have the incentive to sign up to people like me or other people who put together a system of law and also the apparatus for enforcing it. Policemen, judges, courts, jails, bailiffs. Not just to enforce criminal law for your physical safety, but also to enforce civil law, to enforce contracts, to deal with land law disputes, to deal with company law or banking law disputes. Those things are necessary for commerce to continue so that we can live prosperous lives. And I think people will then have the incentive, if you can't get that need met by the state, because the state has fallen over and can't do it, then people will do it privately, simply by opting in, by paying subscriptions to join schemes like that. So I have produced, it's on my website, it's free, anyone can use it, a very crude but fairly complete system of law that people can apply in those circumstances. It's rudimentary, but it's enough to enable you to rent a custard-faced pederast of a judge and kick him in the arse and make him apply it properly. And I think people will then subscribe or vote with their feet into systems of law and order. And in those circumstances, no English person, no white English person is going to opt to join a system that allows a lot of foreign invaders also to be members of it. Because if you think about it, firstly, there's just a basic issue of trust. There's a lot of trust. Are you willing to trust a lot of highly criminalized invader populations to be a part of your securing your own security? You won't trust them to that extent. Secondly, there's a simple question of their criminal nature. If you don't want highly criminalized people living under your system, you don't want to be subject to their crime. If you can keep them out, that's what you're going to do. So most people would, if I were to say to most of you, do you want a paedophile in your neighborhood? Most people will say, no way. If I say, do you want a house burglar in your neighborhood? What about a shoplifter? What about someone who's a danger in their car? You just don't want those people there, because you don't want to have the problem of crime around. And the second thing is, it makes the cost of joining that system much more expensive, roughly 10 times more expensive, because a lot of foreign-born populations are roughly, or African origin populations tend to be about 10 times more criminal at the higher end of the criminalised at the higher end of the criminal scale. So it costs a lot to deal with that. You'll have to pay a lot more money in policemen, in jails, in courts, and you don't want to do that. What? Simply for the privilege of being subjected to serious crime. So I think if the state breaks down and people then have to join a subscription, do it yourself, opt in, opt out systems of law, people will choose to opt into systems of law that really harden and that settle out along very firm ethnic lines. I think that is a benefit. Now, on the back of that, what I then think you will get in the invader ghettos is conditions plummeting very fast, very badly. And this is what I think will happen there. Imagine these very small, very congested, highly urbanized areas where a lot of the foreign populations live. Imagine electricity gets cut off. There's no more gas. There's no more water supply. Your sewage doesn't get taken away. Your rubbish doesn't get taken away. And there's no source of employment. How long can you live like that? You might say, oh, that's being over dramatic. Well, I would invite you, walk around your local invader ghetto and just, do this quietly, don't get noticed, but just look around you and ask yourself, where are the sources of prosperity? Shops are not sources of prosperity. They distribute prosperity. They don't really create it. Where is the wealth creation here? Where are the essential services here that are not provided by the overarching British state? Where are the essential amenities like law and order or emergency services? How do people survive here if the English population pull out, if they just cease to provide welfare, cease to provide employment, cease to provide any wealth in those areas? There are no opportunities in those areas. And I think they could quite quickly become just typhus-ridden hellholes, really, where there's no food, you freeze to death and you die. And on that basis, I think those foreign populations will then make quite a realistic choice. I'd much rather go to my homeland where I am, at least now I'm welcome, rather than stay here and die or freeze to death somewhere where I'm not welcome. Particularly if they have children, and particularly if they have a house that they can sell and take the money back and go and live like a god back in, say, Afghanistan or Somalia or the Congo or somewhere like that. I think that's how I think we're going to solve the situation. That is what I think is going to happen. Now, Wyvern here in this video here, he does a critique of a lot of things I haven't said. I think it's useful to go through what he said, partly because I think he represents, he's a useful specimen of the kind of attitudes and mindset that quite a lot of people are in. Now, I want to go through that briefly if I can. Now, this is something that Keith Woods, you may have heard of Keith Woods, he's worth a watch, smart guy, got a good following as well. He seems to be doing really well. He's certainly on a roll at the moment. Now, what he referred to here is the schizo-right, and that's the term. It's a little bit of a cruel term. It's a little bit broad brush. It's not a term I'd use. I think it's a little bit inexact, but it's catchy, and I think it's more or less accurate. The schizo-right takes people with good instincts and neuters them politically. Look at the France riots, clear case of violence caused by multiracialism, and the schizos couldn't agree if it was a psyop by the New World Order or a multiracial uprising against WF tyranny. Okay, that puts it quite well. I think the way that I would put it, I call it the sedition mindset. The conspiracy mindset, again, that's a lazy way of putting it, because sometimes things are there are sort of some very lazy, stupid conspiracies around out there. I think it's this sedition mindset, the idea that there are calculated plans always going on, and if everything happens, it's because there must be a calculated plan going on. And I think that mindset is, there are quite a lot of people who succumb to the temptations of that mindset. It's characterized by, I think, mental laziness and a preference for ignoring the inside of your head, outside of your head distinction. And just to explain that, that's inside my head is sort of between my ears, inside my skull. That's inside my head. Outside my head is everything outside. So inside is what I dream and imagine, what's playing up on the screen of my imagination. And outside, that tends to be reality. The two are interrelated, but they are not the same. They are different things. And it is a mistake to try and fantasize that they are the same thing. That's simply because you can project something onto the screen of your mind, that is reality. It's not. The outside world, where people go to work, children go to school, people drive cars, and the weather happens, that is different from the thoughts and feelings and emotions and fantasies inside your head. And this sedition mindset, it tends to find it more comfortable to ignore that basic distinction. And the reason it's so it's tempting, particularly if you're out of power, if you feel powerless, it gives you an illusion of certainty. You can say, well, it must be a conspiracy, I know I'm right. That's a characteristic of these people. It's being planned, they're doing it deliberately, and I don't have to produce any evidence, I must be right. And also it gives a sense of sort of moral superiority. And it saves you a lot of work, because you don't have to go around sifting through grubby evidence. You just, if you can imagine something, that becomes your evidence. And I think there are some signs of that with what Wyvern is saying. I think a lot of people do that, and so I think it's necessary for me to try and plug the gaps that mindset leaves open. So now I'm a little bit, I don't feel the need to be too gentle with Wyvern here. He has been very nice, very courteous and complimentary about me at the start of his video. He says I'm a good guy repeatedly. Thank you very much, that's very nice of you. And he says I make interesting points. Well, that's faint praise if ever I heard it. And he does. I do very good work, which I should be commended for. I think that's in the mosque busting. And hats off to me for trying to say trying to chart a way through the problems we're coming to. Where he pays me quite a lot of discourtesy is by simply failing, just not listening to what I've said and saying that I'm saying things that I'm just not saying. So there's a whole bunch of things that he has no evidence for, that he says I'm saying, or things that are unsupported by any evidence, including whether or not I actually said them. And I think it's not that I want to attack him. I want to use him as a specimen, with providing me with the opportunity to deal with misconceptions that I have seen coming up. Okay. Now, I don't propose to go through to play all the parts of his video. I've sort of got quotes here in front of me. What he says, the first thing he says, so no evidence, number one. That's where he says that I'm wrong that there's going to be a collapse because the elites are planning a collapse. Well, to the extent that I can understand that, I think what he means is it won't be a proper collapse. It will be a planned collapse. I think that's what he means. But he provides no evidence, absolutely none at all. He simply says, no, you're wrong, because you're wrong that things are going to collapse, because don't you know the collapse is planned? They are planning it. And everything, it's wrong to say that everything's going to collapse and that's not being planned, which I just think is deeply flawed. Yeah, well, the fact you think it, that's not evidence. Okay. And what he's saying is there are two moves ahead at all times. Really, you know, we're talking multi-generational conspiracies here, in families and groups, institutional groups, financial institutions, you know, Freemasons. Okay. So over the last century, arguably more, they've been planning this collapse. You don't provide, there's no evidence for this. I don't think everyone's going to wake up in the morning and the money's going to run out and basically the power structure is just going to crumble. Well, it would be really, I'd be able to engage better. I think a lot of people think like this, so there's no evidence that I can engage with. So all I can do is say why I think economic collapse will mean political collapse. And really what I can say is that is what happens. There is a pattern of that happening throughout history. I'll deal firstly with the French Revolution. Now if there's a couple of things that I'd like to point out. Now, if you want to see a good 25 basic, solid introduction to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the economic breakdown of the Soviet Union, this video by A History of Everything. I don't know this channel, I don't know who it is, but it's a good outline of what destroyed the Soviet Union. Also, that book there, I think that's a really good book, The Fall of the Soviet Empire by David Price Jones. And this book here, that's The French Revolution by Ian Davidson. That's a really good sort of 300-page paperback introduction to the French Revolution. It's really good. I liked it. Now, if I give a quote, if I do the example number one, the French Revolution, simply a quote from this book. When the crisis came, the absolute monarchy of Louis XVI simply fell over like a dead tree. Their revolution only started to take shape after the Ancien regime had collapsed under the weight of its own bankruptcy, and the revolutionaries found that they were left in charge. That's a pattern. So you get the old system finds it's short of money, it has to call Parliament, it has to go begging for money, its authority collapses, and then someone else rushes into the vacuum. I think that also happened with the fall of the Soviet Union. Interestingly, the fall of the Soviet Union is something that Wyvern, he kind of as a postscript suggests is this evidence that these collapses are planned. He talks about the The Perestroika Deception, some book written by an ex-KGB fella, basically trying to say that the collapse of the Soviet Union was planned and they were doing it so they could lull the West into a false sense of security and then impose communism on us via the UN, and that it wasn't a real collapse. This is nonsense, total drivel. It's the sedition mindset. There's no evidence for it. All the evidence is the other way. If you look at that YouTube video that I showed you, or particularly if you look at this book here, The Fall of the Soviet Empire by David Price Jones. In that book, what you have is there's a chapter about the economics where it talks to a fellow called Vasily Selyunin, who was a financial and economic advisor to Gorbachev. Basically what you'd have, the Soviet Union had always been stagnant. It had always had a rubbish economy. During the Brezhnev years, where Brezhnev really imposed orthodox communism, again, it stagnated even further. And it had no IT systems, no IT revolution. America was racing away. Everyone knew it. And Gorbachev, being a true believing socialist, he said, I'm going to revive the fortunes of the Soviet Union. I'm going to revive socialism, and I'm going to do that by setting it free. So he went to the monopoly state businesses, and he said, you can set your own targets, you can set your own budgets, you can set your own working hours, everything. And so those monopoly nationalised industries thought, great, Christmas has come early, so I'm going to halve my targets, I'm going to double my budget, I want twice the money coming in, please, and our working hours, well, we'll work when we feel like it. And the result was inevitable. Those businesses ran up huge debts, and to stop them falling over, so the whole economy just ground to nothing, Gorbachev, or the Soviet Union, had to print a load of money to bail them out at the end of the year. How familiar does that sound? That is what happened with the Soviet Union, until eventually it went broke. And now that fellow Vasily Selyunin, he went to Gorbachev quite early on and said, with a bunch of other economists, said you need to liberalise the economy, you need to move to a free market economy. Gorbachev gave him a big hug and said, yes, I'm going to do it. And a week later, he met at the Soviet Congress and said, I cannot allow private property, i.e. private ownership of business. And Vasily Selyunin said, right, the Soviet Union is going to collapse. And then he went away. He thought, I can't do anything about it, but I will study it so that future generations can learn from it. And we have learned nothing from it. People never do. No one takes advice. But what he said is the key threshold is when the annual deficit, the annual shortfall in the state's budget reaches 20% of GDP, then, quotes, society becomes ungovernable. That's what happened there. So the economic breakdown, that rolls over into social and political breakdown. That's what he was saying there. So I think it's people say, I think particularly people have a little bit of this sedition mindset. They say, oh no, the enemies we're facing, they're too clever, they're always going to be in control, they're never going to let go, we're always going to have, even if the system collapses, they'll always have control over us. It won't really be a collapse, or they'll really be behind it, planning it all. No, these systems, civilization is delicate. It collapses quite easily. That happened with the French Revolution and the Soviet Revolution. To a certain extent, a similar system collapse happened with, you can see the same pattern with the English Revolution in the 1640s. You had the king trying to rule without parliament, ran out of money because of wars, then he had to go to parliament to beg for money. His authority sort of melted away, and the conflict arose between him and Parliament. Parliament said, we want power now, and it turned into the first civil war. It's not quite as stark as what happened with the Soviet Union or with the French Revolution, but it follows the same pattern. So what I'm saying is that economic breakdown can lead to civil breakdown of the political system, and it isn't always planned out by the elite. People, a lot of elites, including ours, will saw off the branch they're sitting on. They're not doing that because they're clever, because they're playing four-dimensional chess. They do that because they're stupid and ignorant and opportunistic, and they just don't care about the future. They're addicted to power. They are addicts. Okay, the second thing that I need to clarify, and this is from Wyvern's video, it's no evidence number 2. I have not referred to under my system order being imposed by a band of chaps. That's what he says. I think what I think he is the picture he's painting, what I think I think, is that you'll get Dad's army wandering around the streets with broom handles and somehow imposing law that way. Well, they might be able to deal with a shoplifter with their broom handles. They wouldn't be able to deal with the finer points of banking law. So they wouldn't be able to deal with law to that extent. Now, I simply have not said this. What he says, the way he summarises what I've said is, a band of chaps will get together like capable men and will band together, and you'll have like a local union, and they'll essentially have to pay in something, and then they form these community groups, and they basically they patrol the community essentially. They get together and they drive around in vans like a patrolling community. Bob, who served like 4 years in the army 5 years ago, and his pal's a plumber, and his mates from the local cricket club. I have never said that. I don't. You can't impose law that way. You need a transparent, quite detailed system of law, and you need professionals to enforce it. And what I'm saying people will do is to pay in, to subscribe to it, to pay for those the apparatus that enforces that legal code. And the less people can pay, that have to pay, the better for them. But it is not going to be, and it doesn't need to be, a bunch of pals from the local cricket club. Now, no evidence number 3, again, what I haven't said, is that there won't be foreign criminals. He's suggesting, and this is again something that people, I've noticed for some reason, people with the sedition mindset tend to do, is to fetishize crime and criminals. I suspect this might be the reason for some of Tommy Robinson's popularity, because of his criminal background, well, not just his past. And I think, and Wyvern, he seems to have quite a sneaking admiration for Albanian criminal gangs. And what he's saying is that they're very capable and they're very good at what they do, and that there will be a crime carnival, and they'll do very well out of that. I certainly think there is, like, I wouldn't call it a crime carnival. I certainly think that when a state authority breaks down, the immediate pressing symptom that everyone faces is huge fear of crime, because burglars, as I said, they graduate up to being home invaders. They wait until you're in before they break into your house. One of them bashes the husband, over the head. Another one grabs the wife. Another one grabs the children, points a gun at the children's head. Where's your money? And your wife will be screaming at you, tell them where the money is. And if the blood's coming down your face, you'll probably be disorientated, and you will tell them. That's home invasion. Getting carjacked, never knowing if your child will be kidnapped for ransom. This is the evidence from Latin America, and people fear crime, and rightly so. And I think what he is saying is, I underestimate how bad that will be, and that it will in fact elevate criminal gangs, so Turkish, Albanian or Kurdish criminal gangs, and it will in fact give them a lot of power. And what he's saying is, the most criminal gangs, criminal groups will kind of rise to the top. Now, what I'm saying is that fear, that realistic fear, genuine fear of that kind of criminality, that will motivate people to subscribe very fast to some kind of system of law that will protect them whilst preserving freedom at the same time. That's what people want. I don't think people want to sacrifice their freedom. They don't want to have to live under the boot of one criminal gang to protect them from the other criminal gangs, or under the boot of a theocrat or a rogue colonel. What people want, particularly I think English people, is law that is, or freedom that is guaranteed by really firmly enforced law that is based on rigorous ethical debate, that is ethically arrived at and is transparently enforced, but quite aggressively enforced. I think that's generally what English people want. And if there is this tidal wave of foreign crime, all it means is people will be all the more willing to sign up to the kind of system that I'm talking about. Okay, no evidence number 4 is that the British are soft. We're just not capable of dealing with threats like this. Again, this is something that I notice a lot of people with this sedition mindset tend to like to say, oh, we all become too soft, we're all going to lose and the criminal gangs will take over. I think there's some sort of luxury darkness behind that sedition mindset. It's very it's extraordinarily self-indulgent. The idea, I don't need to look at reality, I can fantasize. But what these people tend to want to fantasize is a very, very sort of negative, dark, hopeless kind of vortex within their own minds, projecting up these fantasies of criminality as well. I find it's certainly not a state of mind I'd want to have, but I think it's quite widespread. Now, I certainly think a lot of people, women and children, would not be very good at fighting off serious criminality, which is why I think people would be very happy signing up to the kind of system that I would propose. I don't want power. I think it's a dangerous addiction. But if I had influence over a system like that, I would be very, very comfortable ordering invader gangs to be shot on sight if they so much as touched the fence to our area. You just can't. You have to stamp out that crime any way you can. I think in general, what I think English people prefer is a kind of disproportionately harsh enforcement of the law, where you get someone, you floor them, and then you kick them when they're down. I think that is the English way. That's what we like with criminals. I would certainly be extremely happy to do with that. Historically, that's what we've done. I think we will return to that. And British people may be soft. The softer that British people are, the more they will be willing to join a system which preserves the peace and order that enables us to live the kind of soft, gentle, peaceful life that I've been able to live. So what Wyvern says, I think this is representative of what a lot of people with the sedition mindset come out with. I just don't think the British are ready for this, to be honest with you. Well, I think they are particularly ready for it. The fact that they want to live in peace and security, they'd be ready for someone like me to impose order any way that's necessary. Now, no evidence number 5, that is the contention. That seems to be his view that I've said invaders or foreign populations will meekly leave simply because we ask them to. So the state collapses, there's anarchy, and then someone goes to these some self-appointed community leader in an invader ghetto and says, please leave, and they say, oh, okay, if you say so. And what he's saying also is we are lumbered with them, and he seems to be saying there's nothing really we can do about it. Again, people with that sedition mindset, they love to come to that point of view. There's nothing you can do. It's all dark forever. It's dark night forever from now on. Kind of the temptation to do that. It's a sort of a luxurious temptation. Now, what he says about me is, his view is that with this newly formed kind of base society, they're going to get repatriated. And he says, well, foreign aid will have collapsed in their homeland, so they won't go back. And they will take their chances in the West because it's a better land. Now, I have always been, but more than once, I've been really clear that foreign populations are simply not going to go voluntarily. You can't pay them to go. And the reason is I've gone through the GDP per capita list. Perhaps if I show you this website, hold on. Now this is list of country, if I show you, hold on. This is list of countries by GDP nominal. I've done nominal per capita because if you're earning £1 in Britain, that's still a pound, even if it costs more to live here. That's a pound that you can send home. If you look at this, I mean, basically, it's worth having a look at because it establishes the point I've made more than once, which is that GDP per head is about somewhere between 50 and 100 times bigger in Britain than it is in, say, Somalia or Afghanistan. And I think it's about maybe between 12 and 20 times higher than it is in India or Pakistan. So populations simply, Wyvern is right. We're not going to be able to simply ask those populations to go. They'll tell us to get stuffed and mug us. I mean, they're not going to do it. What I'm saying will happen is if the state collapses, if people then have to opt in to systems of law, and if, as I think, they do that amongst other things, on a very firm, on the grounds of very firm ethnic division, I think you will see those foreign populations being restricted to some very congested, poverty-stricken, pretty dire urban areas where conditions are terrible, where basically the option is to starve, freeze, or die of cholera. And I think they will simply make the rational choice. I would make the rational choice. I might as well go back to my homeland, where at least I can survive and people like me, rather than stay here where no one likes me and I'm going to die. And on top of that, I think you will actually get entrepreneurial, prosperous, wealthy English populations going to those areas and saying, I want to buy up some of your territory. I might go to a bunch of people and say, or to 10 people and say, give me 10 grand each, that's 100 grand. I go to the owner of a block of territory just inside the invader ghetto, and I'll say, I'll give you 100 grand for that block of territory. It's a cheap price. It's worth 100 times that to me, but with that 100 grand, you can go back and live like a god in Somalia or Afghanistan. So just do the trade and go away. And I think that would be a rational choice. That territory will pass from the low bidder to the high bidder. So I don't think that I certainly I'm not saying that those foreign populations will go simply because it's a bit chaotic here or because we ask them to. So what he says is you're not going to strap them to a boat and push it out to sea, and it's kind of you're kind of lumbered to a certain point with these kind of groups. So I think he's saying we're lumbered with them. We can't get rid of them. I just don't believe that. And what he's saying is, he accuses me. He says I'm getting a bit larpy and a little bit Mad Max. I don't think so. The Mad Max world is that's where you do live in permanent anarchy. People just don't want that. It's because if you live without law, you live in poverty, because you need law in order to be prosperous, because you need to regulate commerce and contracts. You need to be able to enforce contracts, and you need the law to be able to do that. We recognise that. The English have always recognised that. Human nature is not perfect. It needs to be governed by law that is effectively enforced. So it is, and this is the sort of, I'm using Wyvern as a specimen of the kind of, again, the conspiracy mindset that I talk about. Try and resist the temptations of this, because what I think he's saying is larpy and a little bit Mad Max. I don't think that's me. I think that's the apparitions in his own mind as to what I've said, because I haven't said anything that he's saying, I'm saying. And he doesn't provide any evidence. He hasn't done the work to produce the evidence in reality to support what he's saying. He's simply saying it's planned and we can't get away from it, and there will always be, these problems are, I think we're lumbered with these problems. He used the word lumbered with them. Okay. Now finally he goes, he just asks questions. He doesn't produce an argument here, but he provides questions. What will happen to the Crown, security services, and to the Rothschilds? Okay. Well, as far as the Crown is concerned, I think the English like the Crown. I think if we get up a system that enables us to live as a nation, as a society, I think English people, we will want the Crown. We will want the King ruling, and so I can see us going to King Charles and saying, will you be our king under this system? I think it would be quite natural for him to do so. Now, he might say, oh no, you're not sufficiently multicultural. I couldn't possibly be your king. So I think in those circumstances, we would do what we've always done, and that is to go and find some scrofulous, interbred Northern European aristocrat with an underbite and offer him the opportunity to be our king. We've done that loads of times in the past. And we'll say, well, you get a free castle out of it, you get a chauffeur, you get a life of idle luxury, and a string of mistresses. And what's he going to say? And all you have to do in return is ride backwards on a horse down the Mall once a year. Well, what's not to like about that? And what's he going to say? No, he might say no. If he says no, right, he's got a cousin who's even a bit more scrofulous, and he'll do it. I mean, he's not going to say no. I like drawing my own curtains, and I've got too many girlfriends, and I don't want any more money, thank you. They'll jump at the chance, they always have. So I think the Crown will continue in those circumstances. As regards the security services, I think you just recruit them to serve the new system to the extent that they're needed, which I think there will be. War, conflict, enemies, they're not going to go away. The need for intel will still be there. You simply recruit them into your new system. I think probably they would be subject to much more, much tougher demands to produce results because they're being paid for. People don't want to pay for them simply to faff about, which there'll be competitive pressure on them to produce. But I would have thought that the same personnel, if you have that need, who do you recruit? The people who've been doing it before. That's what I think would happen. Finally, and most controversially, what happens to the Rothschilds? I assume, when he says the Rothschilds, I don't know what he means. It's possible he means the Rothschilds as emblems of the Jewish space aliens who are controlling my mind via their magic space rays. Well, I don't know what I can do about that. I mean, they're controlling my mind. I guess I don't have any control over that. But I think probably, I'll take it that he means that the Rothschilds are the emblem of, they are a symbol of international investment capital. Very rich people who want somewhere to invest their money. And I have no doubt, under the kind of system I'm proposing, the Rothschilds and others would rush to join, to locate themselves right in the middle of the system and to bring all their money inside it as well, simply because what you have is an orderly, law-abiding, educated, entrepreneurial, intelligent, high IQ population who are producing, who are providing opportunities for investors and can put that investment money to work. And secondly, because there is no tax man. Rich people like areas with low taxes, and this would be an area with no taxes, zero taxes. So I'm sure any global business, Google, I'm sure would relocate to the kind of an area governed by the system that I'm talking about, because no tax. You can just live in a perfectly respectable jurisdiction. You don't have to go off to some island in the Caribbean. You can just set up in Britain, and that is the base of operations, and you don't get taxed for it. So I think it would encourage a lot of business to come in, which creates in turn a lot of prosperity for the population. Now, I think that is relevant to the need to, if society breaks down, if the system breaks down, the important thing is to get up a new polity, a new system fast, and one that is also reasonably prosperous, which I think is possible because of that influx of businesses escaping the taxmen around the world. And that enables a lot of money to come in. That in turn enables society to be able to pay for itself, to pay for its institutions, to pay for its systems and infrastructure. And that means that there is a possibility for the polity, the new system, to get up very fast. Now that, I think, is necessary because of something that Wyvern does brush on. He just touches on very briefly about what happens to the army. He thinks that the army are part of the system and they're always going to be in control of us. I don't think the army is in control of me. I don't think the British Army doesn't want a political function. What armies generally want, certainly in the Western world and certainly in Britain, is two things. The first thing they want is to be paid. Armies like to get paid. They like the soldiers paid, they like their wages paid, they like to have good equipment. So they will work for a society that pays them well. But it's not only that. They're not just a bunch of whores. They also want a good civil authority that they can subject themselves to, that they can serve. They want to serve a political authority that has the consent of the people. And I think if the kind of system I'm talking about were to get up as fast as I think it could in situations of breakdown, then I think you would get a very large proportion of the English population rushing to join it, and it would have that political authority as so having authority from the people, which then gives it political legitimacy, which the army then feels able to serve and to be paid by. And then when you have the army on your side, that then deals with the, I think, no evidence point number 1 or number 2 that Wyvern dealt with, and that is, how do you fight off these highly armed Albanian or Kurdish or Turkish gangs? Well, you just set the army on them, and then it's it's a pretty one-sided affair. It's like the wounded seal facing the pod of killer whales in those circumstances. So I think there is every reason for this system to work, and what I hope I've done, I'd like to say to apologise, to give half an apology to Wyvern. I've been mean to him here. The reason I've been mean to him is not because I want to get him, I want to retaliate, is because it is useful to use him as a specimen of the foolish things, the lazy things that people say about what I'm saying. And I feel entitled to do that because he has been lazy about me. He said some nice things about me, but ultimately he's just put words in my mouth that I haven't said. And that's disrespectful, so I'm entitled to use him as a specimen. And that's what I'm doing here. What I hope I've done is to plug some of the gaps that appear in a lot of people's criticism of what I've said. Okay, thank you very much.